Here we have Boris and Marcus Guerrero, who have come up with a great idea for raising oysters, premium oysters, out of Grand Isle.
We get this idea because from the start we wanted to have sustainable food, so a way to grow organic agriculture. I guess the main difference is the flavor. We got a really good flavor out of the waters of Caminada Bay.
Here we are at Caminada Bay. That's where we grow our premium oysters, of bottom cultural oyster. You see, we have a lot of wind, a lot of current here that create a lot of food for the oyster. Within these waters, you can taste the Caminada Bay flavor. That's why it's so unique and so wonderful flavor in the end.
What they've created is essentially this perfect oyster all the time. They can control the perfect oyster. They've taken what we know that grew naturally here, they put a little bit of thought into it, elevated it just a touch, and created a unique product.
This beautiful Caminada Bay oyster, we're very excited to have them today at the restaurant. They really have that freshness, have that saltiness, that floral, that creamy, rich nuances that you look in an oyster. These farmers are nurturing these oysters like babies. So I think the flavor just represents everything that they do.
And now we're in Bourbon Street with Dickie Brennan. Dickie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Glad to have you.
You are educating people. Oysters are like wine. They have a different texture where they come from. So you have a map.
When we opened here, it was about trying to educate people a little bit more than just give me a dozen oysters. We know where the oysters are coming from. We know the person who's harvesting. If we have 28 areas that you can harvest in Louisiana waters, area 1 through 8 east of the Mississippi River. Then you have another 20 areas going west. But areas 1 through 8, probably 80% of the production of oysters comes out of those areas. I call that a honey hole.
Where people can come here and have like a pairing.
Oh,
where
absolutely.
you can take them through from the beginning.
We've brought oyster farmers in, and I mean, they've participated with the chefs, and throughout the dinner, they tell their story. We are continuing to work with these individuals because they really are boutique farmers as opposed to a commodity farmer. I'm sitting there with them on the last field trip, and I'm like, what's the difference between the one that's flat or the one that has that little pocket?
Sure.
And so there's so many different versions of this variety. And so what we're trying to do is really even pinpoint on, all right, give me these. I want the small one that has the deep little belly, that goes way into the shell.
All right.
See how deep that shell is?
Yes, yes.
And then you'll have some that are flat. To be able to bring select oysters coming out of our waters instead of coming from the east or the west coast, that's kind of our goal.
Perfect.
In 2013, they passed a new aquaculture park in Grand Isle. This is the first time in Louisiana that was allowed to have an aquaculture park for oysters. It all starts with the hatchery. The lab gives us the seed. We bring it to a nursery on land. We put the little seed into these mesh bags, and then we basically put them out in the water. We have a boat that goes and picks them up. We have a little ramp that takes them into the boat, and then we start harvesting, pulling out basically the mesh bags.
We combine the technology, the culture technology, with the breeding program and its results, and the hatchery technology to produce a very sustainable seafood, and in this case it's oysters. And in an oyster's case, they're also filter feeders, so they're very advantageous to the environment. So here is an example of sea farming that works very, very well, and part of the reason is there's no food input. They're filtering natural algae assemblages in the water, so we're not adding feed to the water, which in some fish farming cases can be not very advantageous to the environment. It's a win-win for everyone here.
Our distributor is P J Oysters, so they are taking care of distributing oysters in New Orleans.
Hatcheries have been around for some time. We in the Gulf, we were just blessed. We didn't need them. So Hurricane Katrina comes, and we're looking for a way that we can try to reestablish the oyster reefs and jumpstart them and then keep it going, so we had a public oyster productivity like we always did. It took until after the Deepwater Horizon oil disaster to get the funding through the early restoration funds that were made available by British Petroleum and the state of Louisiana to build and break ground on this Michael Voisin Oyster Hatchery.
This is not a new way to raise oysters, but it's new to Louisiana, it's new to the Gulf. And so these guys went out and then they decided that let's try something else. There is a better way to do it. We don't have to rake, lift the sediment and all these things. And so the cages allowed them to raise this oyster. The oysters it's like bacon on a wire rack. You have circulation all around the oyster. If these are stuck in the mud, just like they're stuck in this ice, it's only beating the top shell. Well, those oysters grow, they're together like this, and you'll see them beat them. Well, only some of that oyster is going to get submerged in that salt, and they breathe, they open, but it's the sunshine. They raise them out, they get a little of that light. There's a little bit of everything that they do, just intensifies that flavor. The oysters are just a touch smaller than, say this, our beautiful Gulf oyster that have been growing off of the reef for 2 years, and these have been raised in beds, lowered and raised, and the shell's more polished. You can see the shell's a little more rough, a little more rustic. And so all of these shells do a great job. After the oysters are shucked, we bring the shells every day back to our recycle bins, and then they're picked up on a daily basis to bring back, to put back in the Gulf. So it's just it's a true form of sustainability from the oysters raised down on the reefs, pulled out through cages as not to disturb the sediment down on the coast, brought to the restaurant, served to the people, give employment to people to be able to shuck oysters, brought back to the recycle to build reefs to stop the coastal erosion. And I've been very fortunate to go around the world and have oysters in Europe and oysters all over. When they're at the peak of the season, in those cold days in South Louisiana, when the water's right, I know that there's not a better oyster in the world than the Gulf oyster. Right. When they're nice sized, when the salinity's right, it's perfect. Not a bad way to spend an afternoon or the morning, huh?
So that's where the food is. That's where most oxygen is too. So they're happier oysters.
Do they dance in the cage?
A little bit. They dance a little, a little bit of that.
I'm gonna have to eat this because I pulled it out. Wow.
I'm going to join you because I've been looking at this too long.